Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another experience of the African Speaks. Right now, I am just trying to keep my faith, but I'm actually looking for more. Somewhere I can feel safe in my holy war. This is the rise of the African. A social media Pan-African movement where we are bringing Black people together for the purpose and the cause to rise the African within you. Raise your consciousness to a God consciousness. Raise your confidence to a Godfidence. Having the experience of being able to live as your most powerful self. That's how we make changes in this world as a people. And so we've been walking down this journey of the power of the divine self. We've been talking about this for a while. The power of the divine self. And I said, I didn't just want to do one session. I said, I need to do a series of sessions so you get a great understanding of how powerful the true you really is, who you really are. And so as a recap, because I said I can talk about the power of the divine self, but if I don't give them the foundation of everything else, you're not really going to get how powerful when they say you can move mountains. You want to know how to move a mountain. And someone talked about that in one of our meetings. It was like, it's not like you go to the mountains and say, move, and the mountain move. Of course, it's a metaphor for life situations, circumstances. They try to figure out how Black people can move the mountain of slavery. Easy, because before slavery, we knew we were powerful. And God created us in a way where we cannot forget. What's up? Oh, all right. Shina's in the building. She said, what's up? Broke through the algorithm. So now, yeah. I was on, it's funny, I was on punishment for a while where they killed my algorithm. They killed my algorithm for 5 months. And so now people who I used to pop up on their pages, I didn't. And so if she's getting it, my algorithm is definitely getting better. One love, appreciate it. And so we had to do the layers. I had to let me build the layers of this thing so you can understand what the divine self is and the power of it. So I sat down and said, hey, we're going to start from the beginning. And we covered the source. We covered the concept of the divine source. We said you can call him God, you can call him Lord, you can call him Allah, you can call him the Most High. It's just the source of what? All things. And so we broke that down as cosmic energy and creative intelligence, basic. It's not a man, it's not a human being. It's a entity of energy and wisdom. There's no physical form going on here. Energy and wisdom. And we said, in order to get there, because there is not one book that you can sit down and understand the source. It's not one book you can read. Some people in spiritual environments would like you to believe that you could read one book to understand the source. But no, we've come to find out that you have to dipple and dabble in the mathematics and the science. that man has come to understand. We said these are the languages God uses to help us understand the world in which was created for us to exist in. Ain't that something? And so we have to indulge into the concepts of what is metaphysics. If you missed those live streams, please go back to the African Speaks and look up the intro. We said we got to study metaphysics. We have to study what is spirituality, our relationship to nature, how everything is related to each other, that connection. Metaphysics is a deeper dive of that connection. And then we said, hey, we can't move into that. We got to get to that subparticle, that smaller process to understand the power of the creator and how the creator exists in all things. The energy of God, the energy that God is, the intelligence that God is in all things. So we had to go to the smallest particles. And that's why we had to say we had to take a look at the quantum physics. Look up spirituality and quantum physics. Look up spirituality and metaphysics. Look up, I had a diagram. Look up spirituality and religious organizations. Spirituality is a great, big, wide circle. But a religious doctrine is very small. And so we went from there to quantum physics to understanding the atomic particle, the power of the divine self from the smallest particle of the atom. And you're going to see where I got educated this week, where I found out where the name Adam came from. And in my head, I said, wait a minute. Knowing that the atom is the beginning of all matter. The atom is the beginning of all matter. Matter is compressed energy. And we talked about the energy in the smallest particle, the atomic particle. And we know that the atomic bomb is an atom split. When they split an atom, boom, they release the power in the atom. Ain't that something? We talked about this. And so I was like questioning, okay, so what came first? The story in the Bible of Adam, or science understanding that there was an atom? Neither one. Y'all gonna learn that today. Neither one came first. They both, I think the story of Adam came second, and then the naming this particle came third. Right. There was something called atom, atom, way before this. We're going to get into it. We're going to definitely get into it. But we said we had to study these things in order to get a clear understanding of the universe and that cosmic power that exists in us. What? The power of that being. We showed you what it looks like when, what type of energy your body with an explosion. We had the video. If you didn't see the video, take a look at it. We showed you an explosion in terms of how much energy your body uses in 30 days. We showed you an explosion of how much your body uses in 3 months. Then they did a drop the bomb and showed you an explosion of what it looks like, what a human body uses in a lifetime. It like, how much power is in you, which is the power of the creator. And so now we're moving into an experience where we want to, and if you missed the intro, go back and get the intro, right? Because I don't want to, as I move forward, I don't want to lose you. In the intro, we discussed and we said that there used to be a people that walked this earth that knew that they were gods. We are talking about the divine, the power of the divine self. This is not a concept that just started. This is something that humanity is getting back to. We need a better being on this earth. And in the Black community, we need to be better beings to continue to leaving our thumbprint in humanity and society. Ain't that something? So there was a people that knew their relationship to all things, knew that I am what I see, and what I see is who I am. There is a oneness that I have with the creation of life around me. And not only that, in that being that existed before interference, there was a being that had no obstruction of information coming from within. People talk about intuition. Can you imagine if there was a society not halted by anything European, a people who learned who they were from their DNA structure on up? And to be able to get to that point where you're untapping the power, the wisdom, the intelligence, the creativity of your genetic being, that means you have to have complete control of your environment. You have to have 100% control of what's happening around you. Ain't that something? Because if you don't, there might be something that leaks or that keeps you from a full understanding or that full connection. We said that you can't do this without complete observation. We're talking about the power of the divine self. And through observation, we were able, as a species, we were able to understand our spiritual connection to the life around us. Let me drop this here real quick. So that we always know we're talking about the power of the divine self. We playing catch up. Now, when you're doing, and so in this process, if you're looking for your most spiritual you, the most powerful you, the most determined you, and people always saying you need to study your history. Why? Because in that you'll find a group of people before the interference of colonialism. You'll find a group of people who had great civilizations before the interference of the colonizers. You'll find a group and body of people who existed in a land where they needed for nothing and could exist in that place without the assistance or interference of the colonizers. This is the importance of studying your history, because you get to that point where you experience the environments it took for us as an African people to put an imprint on humanity that still stands, that they really don't want you to know about. And these are the indigenous civilizations before Europeans entered into the motherland. Why we call it the motherland is because it gave birth to all humanity, of course. And so we're looking at the environment of a society where everything is spiritual. The environment in a society where everything is connected. The environment, we're looking at the environment or the lifestyle of the divine self, looking at the divine self through the concept and the experience of Maya. Now, this is Maya. What is Maya? And I'm not gonna explain the spiritual Kemetic faith. Can't do that. I'm not the expert. However, before we end, I will give you a source that you can look it up for yourself. Because I sit when people say, "Hey, what you do? You go out, you hang out." No, I sit here and I look for more and more information. So we're dealing with the power of the divine self. This is chapter 3. So we had the intro, chapter 1, chapter 2. This is the third chapter. What third chapter, right? And so there's right now a couple of pages. If you didn't get it, go back and get it. But this is the power of the divine self through the experience of Maya. Now the issue is, who is the goddess of Maya? Who is she? Yeah, we're dealing inside Egyptian culture, Egyptian spirituality. She is the goddess of balance, the goddess of justice. Mm. And in the what they call the African creation story, she is a deity within the African creation story. And that deity, and so in the African creation story, and every spiritual discipline tries to explain how the earth came about, how God manifested the source. The creation story is trying to explain how the source manifested life. And so there is not one creation story that does not deal with God manifesting itself. Before God manifested the planets, the universe, and then man. And so those of us who are Christians and Muslims, we don't have the oldest story. And so if you go back to the oldest documented creation story, which is the Kemetic story, it's the oldest. Now let's get this. It's the oldest documented one. Are there things that are older? I'm going to say absolutely. Now, a lot of people sit down and they're like, some of that is not true. It's not true. Well, there are no stories, biblical stories, that you can say are completely true. What man does is man creates stories to help them explain what they can't explain. Now, who got closest to the truth? That's what we're looking for when we're dealing with spirituality, because you want to be guided by truth. Well, the best way to look at that is to look at the societies who've been able to produce more from a spiritual standpoint than economic standpoint, capitalistic standpoint. You gotta look at it. And so if we go back, one of the oldest, most powerful societies, and look at what was their basic foundation. How did they make an imprint where every society today still uses Kemetic wisdom? They changed the stories a little bit, but every place uses them. And you look at the Bible and you look at the Quran and you look at put together, it's 6,000 years of information. When it's chronologically, there we go. It's 6,000 years of information. However, the universe is 4.5 billion years old. And so certain spiritual faiths start when man, 6,000 years. But wait a minute, you got 4.5 billion. And if you're talking about the Bible, 6,000, you're not talking about Africans before colonialism. No, 4.5 billion years old. Who was there? Who? Physically? Nobody. Why? Because man don't come into the play until approximately 200,000 years ago. 200,000. Right. And African people are 245,000 to 1.53 million years old. Exactly. There is nobody older than us. So when you're starting to look into spirit, the divine self, the power of divine self, this is through the experience of Mayat, the experience of balance. And we're going to get there. You got to start looking into who we are. This is why history is important. This is why your culture and tradition is important. Why? Because it dates back 200,000 plus years. It goes all the way back. And so go back to the spiritual system that helps spark all the other smaller systems. Mm. Now in the African creation story, it didn't matter how many stories there were, there's always one joining factor. You can have 2,500 different tribes in Africa. There'll be 2,500 different ways to give God praise. But all life was sacred. And in the process of creating this African story, Mayat, Africans sat down and said, as we put our story together, and they observed the world around them, they realized all life is in balance with each other in itself. They didn't have the big science. You're dealing with a people whose DNA and mindset were not obstructed by colonialism. When they said everything must be in balance with itself, so that means the environment in which we live in order to get you to your divine self, everything around you had to feel as though life was sacred. The hieroglyphics, if you could read it, was always giving honor to gods, deities, spirits, the elements. They lived life in harmony with the world in which God brought them in. And so this is important because when, the next one we might start talking about melanin. Because it's you got to understand why African people are so important. And so in this space of in the creation story, and they're dealing with balance, and I'm going to show you in terms of the wisdom of this and how we all systems take off from this African story, the African creation story, all spiritual systems. Now, some people have an African spiritual system that they follow. I would love to hear that story. But in the Egyptian, the Kemetic story, Egypt is a word that white folks gave it, but it's called Kemet. We called it Kemet, white folks called it Egypt. In that story, Atum was the first, he said, created himself from a mound of dust. Atum. And when you look at the environment in which they created themselves to live in, whatever deity and whatever god that they gave, there was a one high God, and there was deities, and there were spirits, and there were elements, everything that they conceived of, and in order to connect. Why? Because they realized they lived in balance with the universe. And how in tune do you have to be that when science come along, because there's a line between in Kemetic cosmology, you have the science of creation and the spiritual interpretation of creation. Two different things. The science of creation and the spiritual interpretation of it all leads to a state of balance. Spiritual interpretation of those sacred stories, those sacred myths. However, the science of it, meaning that every element that God created has a deity, has an element, and has a spirit, and other gods or smaller gods. That God had responsibilities. This is why you can go to some African spiritual sects, and people will be like, they're giving honor to the fish, they're giving honor to the water. Why? Because those are the deities that handle the sustenance for them to live. Mm. Cattle, grass, the elements, earth, water, fire, air. And all of them had deities. Why? Because everything was one in God. But the highest form you can get was Atum. Ain't that? He was the first. Now, in science, the first particle that creates matter was called a what? Is you look at the word itself, an atom. Now they can't give you what the Africans are giving you, because then you'll know. You will know. Wait a minute. This is not a European concept. This is all the Africans knew this way before science. They had tools. Well, we created our own tools. This is why we were so clever, and we had no interference. Again, we're dealing with the divine self through the experience of Maya, living in harmony and balance. There was a culture that knew. When you look at, where's my wallet? It's not here. When you look at your dollar bill, there's still United States and everywhere else still pays homage and gives honor to the civilization that documented the sciences in relationship to the connection and everything that they were able to create as a community, as a people. The wisdom they came with. Why? Because there was absolutely no interference in the environments in which they were allowed to create for themselves. And everything that they created for themselves trickled down to the colonials, to the colonizers. So now when you look at science, they named it the smallest particle after who? The guy that was in Kemet. Scientists say that we are made of dust, stardust, which is carbon. Carbon is 666. People say that's the mark of the beast, but that's also the mark of man. And then when you're dealing with stardust, the blackness of the creator, the blackness of God. God was there was nothing but God. And we come out of that. You want to know why you're chocolate? Because in the beginning there was nothing. And then all of a sudden, this is why you see pyramids. Let me get behind here so you can see it. So when you see a pyramid, it is the reason why it's one of the reasons why it's a triangle was because if you look at how my hands are coming up, it mimics the manifestation, how to do it right there, of God coming up out of nothing and expanding. What? Y'all get it? 666. I am 666. Be careful. You got to be careful of some of the lies that they tell you. Now in religion, they understood that there was a people who understood the balance in which we lived in, and they created great civilizations because they lived in balance, giving everything honor to the creator. They said, well, we're going to have to create Adam and Eve. But Adam, when you're doing it from a Islamic point of view, Adam is mankind. Let us make man. Adam is mankind. Adam is the species of man. It's not one. However, the first, and here they say Adam, made out of dust. Christians say, from the dust we came, from the dust we shall return. Where did they get it? Where did they get their story, their creation story? Almost all creation stories come out of the African creation story. You can find pieces of it. Now, in the art of Mayat, you want to access your most powerful self, that you have to live in balance with the universe and with people and with life. So when you start diving into the power of who you are, look at the balance that you have with people, with nature, and your journey. The ones that you share life with daily. How well are you in balance with them? Because that's going to dictate how much power you can emanate from within. Now, how much divine power, let's give it that. And in this space of Mayat, this balance, how do you create a community, a society, that after tens and tens of thousands of years, people are still ciphering off your wisdom and your knowledge, yet they can't produce it because they don't live in environments of balance. And so in that, the goddess of Mayat, there are 42 ideals. 42. And they say when you have finished your life, they will look at all 42 values, and they will weigh your heart against the scale of a feather. What type of society is this? Now you understand how powerful people are when your heart will be weighed as a feather. This is how you spiritually live. And so all 42 you're going to be judged by. And so just a way that you have to walk, a being, in terms of being able to be at balance with the gods. Let's get this. A balance with earth and nature, a balance with people, a balance with your ancestors, a balance with the elements, then a balance with spirits, then a balance with any other deities, and then balance with the Almighty. You had to go through the layers for them to have a society. And the only reason why the society was destroyed was because of nothing that they did. But it was the fact that the colonizers were jealous of the power and intellect of a people. And if you never watched the African history class, there are excerpts from in Greek and Roman history where they said these people are light years, have light years of wisdom above us. And that caused the problem. Why? Because we want everything they have. Somebody grab that book called The Iceman's Inheritance and read it. But in Mayat, the ideals of Mayat in which you had to live, to master, to come about your divine self. It's 42 of them, and they said the 10 commandments come out of this. And a lot of other spiritual systems pull from this. And so as you seek the power of true you, if you do not have balance around you, you won't get there. But I want you to dive into understanding the lifestyle, the Kemetic lifestyle. Now we have a lot of people leaving religious systems, Christianity as well as Islam, for a more in-depth spiritual experience, for a balance and a self-awareness in God. Now, we are rewriting Christianity in my community. What to incorporate a deeper spiritual awareness. Why? Because we know that most people are not going to run away I don't want to be a Christian. Well, what happens if we tell you Christianity the way the the colonialism, the colonists, the colonizers put it, is not what it was. It was also a smaller reflection of balance. And this is why they can conceive of someone having divine power when you walk in complete unification with everything that's around you. And that's what created you. That is what Jesus meant when he said, the Father and I are one. Balance. And in Kemetic cosmology, every single idea has a deity that governs that particular request. I honor virtue. There's a deity. I benefit with gratitude. I am peaceful. I respect the property of others. You can hear the Ten Commandments in here. I affirm that all life is sacred. Thou shalt not kill. I give offerings that are genuine. This is from the heart. I live in truth, and truth was defined by their spiritual environment. I regard all altars with respect. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion. I speak with sincerity. I consume only my fair share. Give as you are able and take as you have need. This is a lot of Christian values in here. I offer words of good intent. Can you imagine a society and wisdom? And this is way before colonialism, way before interactions of a different being, a different version of a human. Mm. I relate in peace. There's a deity of peace that will judge you when it's your time. I honor animals with reverence. But I may not read them all. I can be trusted. Look at this one. I care for the earth. Pollution, and you look at for all life is horrible. What we're doing to the earth. I keep my own counsel. Hmm. Meaning that's that your relationship with a higher self. No one has to tell you. No one has to tell you to be godly. You can tell yourself that. I speak positively of others. I speak life. Hopefully, y'all been going to a Keebaland Inspirational Sunday. We've been talking about speaking life for a minute. I remain in balance, and I can't see that. I am truthful in my relationships. Trustful. Trustful, truthful. One of them. Ain't that something? These are the things you're getting judged on in your transition. But imagine a society based on this spiritual awareness. What type of person is that being that is at one with all things that was created by God? And so as you journey to your highest self, haha, Chin said, how on council, I mind my business. However, sometimes your brother's or your sister's business is yours too. When you're dealing with feeding the hungry, she can't eat. Let me go feed her. That's my business. I feed my sheep. But I get you. I hold purity in high esteem. Wow. Do you understand what type of being that was? Now you understand the African imprint to humanity and why they don't want you to study your history or your culture and see the power. You see the power of a people. Now get this. This is something that you only learn in my African history class. In the midst of all of this, and they tell you how great Kemet was. Kemet, even though it came together before Kush, Kush was the gorilla in the mist. Look how small Kemet is, but look at the other civilizations. And so if you can imagine the greatness of Kemet and what we know, what were the bigger civilizations like? The larger civilizations like? Kush was always helping Kemet to maintain their relationship with community, nature, each other, and God. Because Kemet, this is how the Romans were coming in. If you see the Mediterranean Sea, which is right there where Kemet is, that's how they were slowly trying to get into the motherland. And Kush was always would have to run into Kemet, fight with and for Kemet, push out the Romans or the Greeks, and then go back into Kush. So can you please stay in harmony? And there was one time where Kush got tired and said, you know what, if they can't keep Mayat stable, balance stable, we just tired of going to war. And they let the Greeks in. They let the Romans in. And then Romans, of course, the Greek and Romans didn't just want Kemet. They wanted the continent. Why? Because it didn't matter where they traveled. It was abundance of resources. They're coming from a place where they didn't have it to where everyone could share. Everyone could give. There was a group of there's an African people who lived in the experience of balance, in the experience of the divine self, Maya, who had great wisdom and intelligence. Look at these civilizations. At one of my African history classes had over 1,200 views, and that's a lot for me, y'all. I said I'm going back to dropping this wisdom about African history. And my African spirituality class had another 1,200 views, y'all. I was like, whoa. I'm in conversations with people who are not in my community, which is a beautiful thing. That means this experience or the desire to have a balance within our own communities, this African diaspora, is growing. In the experience of the divine self and the experience of a culture of a people who were able to reach their highest state before colonialism. Again, there are 42 deities in the Maya spiritual system. 42. Everything was sacred. Everything was in harmony. So when you start thinking about the journey to the divine self, you got to remember that you have to connect to all things. You have to go back deep into the history of who you are. You have to travel back into yourself. Don't be scared of the history. Don't walk away from it. Don't shy from it. Don't hide yourself. For those, before I go, and I'm going to do this for the sister, I went to a sister's page called Girl Boss, My World Rules, where I found the history of the African creation story. She does a great job at breaking multiple things down from an African perspective. So if you want to know where I got some of this information and you want to go in depth to the cosmology of Kemet, look her up. And there's so many other things that you can pull from. Look her up. And say, hey, if you want to do a comment, I heard about you from the African Speaks. Look them up. But in that journey of the power, understanding the power of who you are, you got to go backwards to go forwards. You got to understand the culture. You got to understand everything. And then it doesn't matter what African spiritual system that you choose. As long as you're living from the experience of Mayat, understanding that we are connected to all things. We are connected to each other. I'm connected to the water. And what they say is you have to analyze, and that's what Africans did. They analyzed, how did you get so it's so sweet? We analyze nature. The way you come in concept or a contact with the true deeper understanding, you have to be observant to all things around you. And the simplest form, if y'all gonna sit down and teach community and connection and how God works, where God is all things. He's everywhere. It's everywhere. She's everywhere. We talked about the power and the movement of the atom. It's in everything. And if you don't get it, have them study ants. I said it. Ants. The most simplest yet complex civilization where they build and create for each other. We have the ability of free will. They don't. When they're born in their DNA makeup, they know what they're called to do genetically. They have different duties that they got to perform. And no one has to tell them. Why? Because the way God created it, God said, look, I'm going to leave your DNA structure open and this is what you're going to do. You can't be or do anything but what I've called you to be or do. So you have, and then some of them have wings that they can fly. The queen has the babies. You have worker ants that go out and hunt food. Now, how do they talk? It's like, they don't really. They communicate, but now here's how do they find food? Do I tell you I found food? No. I drop a pheromone, and you ever seen an ant trail? If he's walking, he finds food, he takes that piece of food and he's walking back. As he walks back from where he found the food, he drops the pheromone. All the other ants can smell the pheromone and they will follow his trail. And until the last ant comes back saying, hey, there's no more left, they start erasing the pheromone. So after all the food is gone, that trail disappears. Community. Africans studied nature and said we must live as a people, as one. We're all connected. That's how they built societies. That's how they came in power of their divine self. They understood their connection to the Creator. In the journey of Christianity, that's what Jesus did. The Father and I are one. That's what we're here to do. That's what the divine self, the journey toward the divine self leads you to, understanding your connectedness. And the decision was just made. The next show is going to be about the makeup of your physicality. We're going to talk about melanin in this next one because you have to understand why God chose you and how he created you so that you could always find the experience of God, which is a frequency, vibration, energy. Your makeup of who you are is set for you to always be able to find the tune or the vibrations and the energy and spirit and power of the Creator. You're born with it. The power of the divine self. God said, I don't want to sit down and create something in my image that can't find me. I'm going to make it so that you can vibrate with the same frequency that is around you, which is the universe. I am in all things. My energy, that atom, we're made of billions and billions of atoms. 10 billion, 10 billion, 10 billion. Tens of billions. That's it, something like that. I'll have the number for you later. But in the experience of Maya, you want to know who you are. Disappear in your balance and your understanding of how you relate to all things and how all things relate to you. The makeup of melanin, you should advertise. Yeah, I'm gonna do that. Appreciate it. We're gonna get this. The power of the divine self. Now, I have some friends who are part of the Kemetic cosmology, and I may ask them to come on and explain how their experience now allows them to find themselves in tune with nature and the creator. I know for me, real talk. So there's a pathway from my house to my driveway. There's trees on both sides, and I got to walk between the trees. I went outside, and there was a big spider web that I couldn't walk to my car. I had to go down my lawn and around the corner and up the driveway to get to my car. Now I know that I'm connected to nature. So I walked as closest to the spider web, and it was a fat, ugly, nice, juicy, looked like it was poisonous. I ain't trying to touch it. I just said you need to move. And if you don't move, I have to kill you because you're interfering with my transition to and fro. So I'm asking you to please take this web down and go somewhere else. And this was recent. This was like about 2 weeks ago. And so I went around the corner and I work on the evenings. Got in the car, left, came back, and I almost that night I walked and I stopped. I almost walked into the spider. And I paused and I said, didn't I tell you to leave? By morning you need to be gone. I go around to walk up the staircase. And I had a conversation with nature. Now I'm not gonna sit down and have a conversation with a lion. No, unless I got empty steaks and I'm throwing the steaks out. No, I'm not about to do that. I'm gonna be smart about it. But yeah, with this I did. I woke up that next morning, the spider and the spider web was gone. He left. You got to be able to connect yourself with the environment and the atmosphere. If babies don't like you, you're not on a right frequency. Mm. Water is a part of who we are, and it's a part of everything. You need it. It's sacred. I'm gonna do one on water too. Ain't that something? I'll do a powerful. We had a DVD about water. We have to. The power of the divine self is connecting your energy with the energy of the universe. When you're in balance with all things, and that energy can flow through you. Why? Because it already flows to you. It is up to us to open our awareness to it. And when you do that, you will definitely begin to experience the power that the Creator placed within you. Then and only then will you understand what it means when I say the rise of the African. And we are asking you to release the wisdom, the knowledge, the power, and connect yourself back to everything that God created so that we can be who He called us to be, who she called us to be. Because God has no gender. We just do that. So we can say he or she or it. And we can leave a better imprint than what we're leaving. The fingerprint that African people put on society is tremendous. There's nothing that science creates today that doesn't come from our mathematics. Everything that science is came from our people. We created math, science, astronomy. We created all of it. Art, music, all of it. Culinary concepts, all of it came from us. Why? Because we are at one with the universe before the interaction of colonialism Our DNA was open, and the data that God wanted us to know was in us, and it still is. The same way we talk about epigenetic trauma, let's talk about epigenetic wisdom. That's a whole different concept. Brother might preach about that one. Have you accessed the genius that God placed in you? That's the rise of the African. This is a God's dream. My life is a God's dream, and it's everything. I am just looking to be able to keep my faith, but I'm looking for more. I'm looking for a safe place in my holy war. I'm not leaving this planet before I experience my greatest self. How about you? Join me. Let the African in you rise.